everybody. Okay, so today I am going to show you how I create my little goddess doll, or altarpiece dolls. I guess you could call them dolls. Somebody had requested, they wanted to see how these were created, and I will show you briefly, because these things usually take me quite some time, but I will show you the overall way that I put these together. So first, they are made of polymer clay, and this clay is a type of clay you have to soften it up, get it warm, and the warmer it gets, the softer it is and easier and pliable it is to shape, mold, and sculpt. So you have to kind of work with it or it breaks like this. Also, it just depends on the brand that you're purchasing. There are several different brands out on the market. I prefer to work with Sculpt 3. Alright, so I prefer to work with Sculpt mostly because it's soft and it doesn't hurt my fingers to work with it, because some of this clay can get really, really hard to work with. So today I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I make my leaves. This is a translucent clay. This one is really super soft. You can see when I push on it, it's just really it's like Play-Doh. This is the clay that I choose. I prefer to work with when I create my faces, and I actually use a mold to do the faces, and I do that just because if I try to create these faces, it takes me longer in the process to create the project. So I will utilize these little molds, and there's another artist that does these and sells them on Etsy, and she has different sized ones. They have different facial expressions. When I go to utilize these, I never get the same face every time because of how clay works. If it doesn't pull out properly, the nose could be misshapen, the lips might not turn out right, so I'll go back with my tools. Any of these tools, I have ones that have sharp points to them. I have the rubber tipped sculpting tools. I will go back and correct the face, and by doing that, they always turn out different. So when you're working with molds, you can get some water. There's different types. This is a silicone mold. This is the harder. This is a polymer clay that's been baked, so it's super, super hard. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to spray once in the mold to coat it with the water. Now there's this little coat of water inside. I'm going to take my clay, and I usually will form it into a point. We're going to see how this works out. That way I know that it's going to get in the nose area because of all these little nooks and crannies in there. And I will put and position it into the nose and push forward. That way it doesn't lose the shape of the mold. And I press and it comes right out. And do you see how there's lines in here? That's just from the way that formed the clay, basically. So I will just come back through with my finger and I'll smooth those out. The water will eventually dissipate. This is not a cleaner clay that I have. You guys can see the lines, but I usually don't worry about that because I have pets, so I get hair all over the place, and it's really hard to keep and tame it down. But when I go back through to shape all of the features really well, which I will show you, I will get most of those out of there. So that's how the face is created. I will then go with a tool. This is a slicing tool for polymer clay, and I will carefully cut the face from the big chunk of clay. This is a very, very sharp tool, so if you invest in one of these, just be super, super careful. And you see, sometimes working with a softer clay, it will misshape it, but like I said, you'll never get the same shape twice. So just be prepared for that. Unless you're really, really, really good at taking clay out of molds, which I haven't even mastered, and I've been doing it for quite some time. So I will just go back and clean that up a little bit. And so now I have my face, the beginning of the face. So now I will just put some details into the face and get it to the shape and the way that I want it. So if I want it to have a sharper chin, I'll pinch it. The rest of this I will try to do with my tools, but I will just get the overall shape that I want with my fingers, because our fingers are normally our best tools when sculpting. And that's because we can apply pressure where we want it, and we have a better idea of how much pressure a spot needs. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to take my needle tool and I will very lightly just create the indent of the eyes. So they're a little more defined. I'll go back in with the lips. I usually don't use the definition or the needle point for the lips, but in this case they were a little crazy deformed going on there. Now I have these styluses. These have different shapes on each end. So you just find the size that you need, and that way you can form the nose was a little deformed too, guys. Bear with me, just gotta reshape the nose. Okay. And again, you don't have to, just for the sake of this video, I just did it once. But you can obviously redo your mold. Okay, so just reshape the eyes a little bit. Create your brow line. I will draw in the brows normally, that's the harder part of this process, is gauging where you want your brows to be. Reshape the lips and the chin line. And to better go through this process, sometimes I will reference pictures of a face. But most of the time I just kind of go with the shape. Because when you paint, then you can get more of a definition with the paint. So there's a little bit of the face. That's the beginning. So now we're going to go into the base. Depending on what color hair I make, like on this one, I made the hair more of like a branch kind of look to it. So on the back side, I made a disc with the same color. But in this case, we're just going to utilize the clay that I have in front of me. So you're going to ball your clay up and you can flatten it out. You can use a rolling pin, but sometimes it's kind of hard to get that thickness. that you want. The thinner that this clay, sometimes it'll snap on you. If it's too thin, it won't, it'll, you know, and you don't bake it long enough, it's real finicky, it won't hold up to whatever use you're using it for. And I usually make these dolls magnets. So if you were to put a magnet on the back side of this, and it's constantly being pulled off of the refrigerator, sometimes it might crack it, anything to that effect. Okay, so we're gonna try to keep it kind of a consistent shape and thickness, and then you can take your face and put it right there on the disc. I will take my tool. Sometimes this is a better idea. Sometimes I'll go around with my tool and I'll just make sure that they're sealed together. You can also get a product, it's called Bake and Bond, and it's just like a liquid type of clay, and you can put it on here and put this here, and when you bake it, it'll seal it together. But I like to just take a piece of clay, because that Bake and Bond isn't the cheapest stuff in the world. And I will take a piece of clay, roll it into a snake. Doesn't have to be beautiful. And I will just take it and wrap it around. Doesn't have to be on all the spots. And I'll just make sure there's some on the bottom, some on the top. And I'll go back through and tuck it in and make sure it's in contact with both of the pieces of clay. This will be hidden by the hair pieces or the leaves or whatever you're choosing to surround your face with, so it doesn't have to be great. Just tuck it in so there's contact between the two pieces of clay. And that way, like I said, you don't have to do it this way. If you feel comfortable just going around and just kind of pulling on the sides of the face, but sometimes it can deform it and make it look weird. So it's just my mood. Just depends on my mood and what I want to do. So I will smooth that out. And again, it doesn't have to look beautiful, so that way you know that it is indeed sticking to the other piece of clay. All right. So now's the fun part. We get to add some hair to it. I am going to go ahead and I'll start out with the dark piece of clay, if I can get it to be soft enough to use. So it's pretty soft. You can tell you rubbing it through your hands like this, snake-like, folding it into each other, into each piece, folding it. It'll start to get a little softer. This is a harder type of clay. I combined a couple pieces, different colors to create this color, so the clay is kind of harder, but I can roll it and create the snakes. So you would just make a series of thinner pieces. You can make them as thick or as thin as you want. They can be inconsistent. For me, I usually will have my X-Acto blade, and I will make a set of thicker ones and a set of thinner ones. The reason I do that is so the thicker ones on the base are stronger. My thinner ones will go on the top, and those will be more for the shaping and the aesthetic and the look of it when you're creating whatever look that you're going after. If it's a nature look, if it's more of a theme, butterfly, you just want crazy colors, it's up to you. I will sometimes point the ends. It's easier to do it now than it is to try to do that when it's all on there. So always try to shape your pieces before applying them. And if you don't need and combine the clay, it can become brittle after you bake it, and these pieces of hair will break off. So just be really mindful of how long you are kneading the clay to heat it up, to combine it. It kind of activates it. So you gotta, and it also just pay attention to how old your clay is. Sometimes the older the clay, the compounds in this clay will dissipate. If you leave this clay on paper, it will absorb the plasticizer that's in it. This clay is a form of PVC. That's why you have to cure it in the oven to get it to harden. So leaving it on paper or out in the elements, sometimes if you leave it in a plastic container, it will actually adhere to the plastic container. Yes, I have had that happen. Baggies are the same way. If the baggie is made of a certain plastic, it will take on that compound. It'll join basically. But there are some baggies out there that it doesn't do that too. So I'm just making different sizes and creating the points on here. Sometimes I'll make their hair really super long. There's a happy middle length that I usually use, and that's just because I know that if it's going to be a magnet, somebody's going to keep it on the refrigerator or anywhere else, that it will be moved a lot. So I don't want the pieces to break off if it's being handled a lot. But if you know that your piece isn't going to be moved around a lot, by all means, make it as long as you see fit, and as long as you know. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move to a brighter green. Okay, so we have the hair pieces done. Now we're going to move on to making the leaves that are going to act as a crown. So you can take these silicone molds. You can buy them at your craft stores. They have different designs. There's flowers, there's butterflies. In this case, we're going to utilize a couple of these and a couple just using the tip. You don't have to necessarily use the whole leaf, obviously for size purposes. So what I do is I just take a little piece of clay and utilize the very tip of this one. And I'll show you how I do that. We're going to do this with these molds. You do have to spray them with water. It's just easier that way. So we're going to take a little piece of the clay, and I usually will ball it up. I'm going to go ahead and utilize a little piece of this. So we're going to spray water on it, just one spray, and I will go ahead and flatten that out with my thumb. And like I said, I'm not utilizing the whole leaf. So I'm going to take that out, and there's my leaf shape. Now you can also, if you don't have a mold, obviously just shape these leaves. You can work it in your fingers. You're going to want to go ahead and ball it up, and you can rotate the very tip of it in your fingers like a teardrop. You're going to press on it with your finger. You're going to get that little bit of a shape going on, and then you can go ahead and roll the ends and just shape it with your finger and twist and shape, and take your needle tool, run a line down the center, and then you can shape it into the leaf that you desire it to look like. Okay? And you can obviously utilize leaves like this as well. But for me, to make a bunch of leaves that are like this versus being able to just put it in a mold, because I make several of these, I prefer to use the mold because it's just faster that way. So you're going to spray your mold again for each time that you want to make a leaf. I put a little bit bigger piece of clay in here this time. You're going to work it into the mold itself by pressing on it. And yes, some of these clays will make your fingers turn different colors, but that's okay. All right, and then you can, there's another leaf. All right, so that's how we utilize that. I'll go ahead and show you one on this one as well. I'm gonna go ahead and mist it. Make your ball of clay. I'm going to press that down into the shape of the mold. Okay. There's the tip of the leaf. So the bigger leaf here, I didn't want the other end, so we'll go ahead and we'll just trim this off right where I needed it. And we can now, so with some of these molds you have to kind of get the clay out of each little leaf here. So it gets a little tricky and tedious, but worth it in the end for the aesthetic look of it. So I will just take my X-Acto and go through and shape them so I know until I'm satisfied. Be very careful if you're using an X-Acto blade. Sometimes they want to cooperate, other times with this clay that just doesn't want to. I'll go ahead and separate these ones up here. And by doing this, you can shape this leaf to sit where you'd like it to sit. If you like that full form look to it, by all means, just, you don't have to cut into it at all. All right, so now we have a few of our leaves ready. We can go ahead and put the hair on. So I'm gonna take my thicker pieces and I will just start to incorporate them around the face. The last couple of pieces, now that I've got the shape going on, I will form them to the flow that I want in the hair. This clay will stick very well to get to itself. You can use more colors. We'll go ahead and create this twist in her hair. You don't have to do it that way, that's just how I choose to do it. So we can take these other little strands that we've created and we can cut them to shorter strands so we can go ahead and shape around her face into these little shorter strands of hair. like that. And of course, just play with it. Just make sure that all your little strands are kind of connected, touching each other. You just go through, make little marks that look like little strands of hair to make sure that they're all connected. I usually I'll go through with my tool like this. I'll make sure everything flows nicely, connects to each other, connects into the piece. And then I will take my needle tool and I will go through these pieces and just create the texture. And you go through, just put these in the direction of the hair piece that it's flowing in. And it's always easier to do this step after the clay is in place. So you will go through each strand. And this is just, doesn't have to be every single part. If you, whoops, see, sometimes that happens and you stab the face. Sometimes I've missed certain sections of the hair or, you know, pieces of the clay in here. But really, the overall, if you get the top, like these pieces down here, normally through the bottom, I'm not going to mess with the texture. I'm usually focused on more of by the face. So just kind of go. Now we're going to attach the leaves. I usually start with the large leaves first and then work my positioning of where I want them and shape. So in this case, we're going to act as a crown. So I want this to be, make sure that it's nice and sealed up here. I will just lightly connect these pieces to the hair without losing the shape. I will come back in and start layering these around the hairline just to see which way is going to work better, which I do believe we are going to try to go underneath this leaf. Sometimes it takes a little finesse and design here, but for me, I'm more of a flow artist. I don't plan my art, I just go with it, and that happens, but for the most part, it works out. So if you are a planning type of creator, by all means, please have your plan first. I think that's all I'm gonna do. I think that's all I'm gonna do for the leaves here. I go back in, I try to incorporate a little bit more of these lines into the leaves because sometimes doing mold you lose that part when you're working with it. So I will go back through and redefine the lines so they look a little more realistic. You can go through, sharpen the line, So now you can choose to either incorporate glitter, incorporate paint, anything to that effect. But usually I will bake this and then come back through and paint on it. You can do beads, you can do gems, and so I just have a bunch of these little jewels. You can get these. People use them on their nails. I ordered mine online through a craft store for doll making. And so you can go ahead, definitely, before you bake, you're definitely going to want to incorporate these first. It's just, they stay better, so you don't have to use super glue. Super glue on polymer clay sometimes doesn't work out very well in the long run. So with these pieces, you can go back to the Sculpt Bake and Bond, and you'll dab some just like glue. You can take your piece. You can also incorporate an opening and just make a little hole there. Sometimes they're kind of hard to work with because they won't stick to anything. I didn't want to go over there. Just didn't want to go. Alright, so in this case, we're going to use some the bond. So let me show you. It's just like a liquid clay. I'm going to go ahead and dip a little bit. We're going to incorporate it into the little opening, and also it allows me to pick it up. See how that works, guys? Pick it up. If it'll let me. You know, I said that and then now it doesn't work. Gotta love it. All right. We can get this to stick. There we go. So if you're using the Bake and Bond, it's easier that way because it'll stick to your little tool. So I just incorporate that into the little opening. So now she's got a jewel. Sometimes I'll incorporate jewels into this eye area. I'll give them a little beauty mark. Sometimes I'll put it in the hairline down in here, which in this case we could do, so I can just show you. So I got a little bit of the Bake and Bond on my tool, and I'm going to put a little bit right here and a little bit over here on the hair. And again, it's just like clay, it's just like glue, it's just meant for clay, it's just clay on clay. And then I will get a little bit more. Takes patience. And I will incorporate it. So there's some jewels. And again, I will bake this according to the instructions on the clay. They're all a little different. It does depend on where you live. So that is the idea. Now, so I would probably add more of the darker along the edges. But like I said, most of the time I will make the backing the same color as the hair. That way I'm not using too much. And you can also take the bottom, you can curl it, you can just make it any shape that you like. So after I'm done baking, I will, if you want these little vines, now before you bake is the time to add them. I'm not going to add them since I haven't painted the face yet, but I will paint I baked this face, painted, and then I incorporated this around it. It's a little harder to do it that way because you're utilizing the Bake and Bond so those pieces don't fall off. So it's just a little more time consuming when you do it in that fashion. But just play with it, find out what works for you. If you feel that you need to do the piece all at once, if you're a beginner, I suggest that. It's a little easier that way. And then as you get a little more practiced in it, you can reach for the Bake and Bond and utilize it that way and do several baking sessions to add on to this. But I will come back through on this piece and I will go ahead and paint the lips. This is just an acrylic paint. I'll go ahead and add in the eyeliner, which is also an acrylic paint. I utilize a pen for the eyebrows. Sometimes I'll use an ink with a really fine tipped brush like this one, just a super fine tip brush, and I will go ahead and brush in the eyebrows. Some of them haven't had eyebrows, and I have just taken some pastel chalk and went ahead and chalked the makeup on the face. I do that before I bake. If you're going to use pastels, do it before you bake. It's a little bit easier. It sticks better. Because if you bake this, it gets really kind of smooth and it won't adhere to it properly, and you'd have to probably utilize paint. And it'll come off a little easier. You can also use mica powder. On this piece, I used mica powder, which is just the shimmery powder. Some people use eyeshadow to bring it a little bit more luster to it if they want it to be shimmery like that. So just I would just play and see what you like, and go from there. So I hope this was helpful for you guys and you get a little bit of insight on how I create my art pieces. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for watching. Bye.